All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a little less than 4 minutes before we start. We'd like to have the candidates head up to the stage. We will begin here shortly. Thank you. Once again, if we could have everyone seated and stage. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Livermore City Council Candidates Forum. Tonight, we have 5 candidates with us. From Council District 3, we have Steve Dunbar, David Farley, and Jeff Kaskey. In District 4, we have Tom Souls and Kristie Wang. For our forum, we are having all the candidates participate at the same time, regardless of the district. While only voters in Districts 3 and 4 will be able to cast a ballot for their preferred candidate, the council represents the entire city. It's important that all residents get to know the candidates and hear about their views, values, and visions for Livermore's future. I'm Gina Chanel Wilcox, the president and publisher of the nonprofit news organization Embarcadero Media. We are the East Bay Division, and that includes Pleasanton Weekly, Danville San Ramon, and Livermore Vine. My co-moderator tonight is Jeremy Walsh, our editorial director. Our staff reporter, Jude Stremp, they, them, is soon to take photos. Thank you to the Livermore Valley Chamber of Commerce for partnering on the logistics of this forum. Finally, thank you to the candidates for and when to stop. In the interest of time and allowing as many questions to be posed as possible, we will ask the candidates to save any rebuttals for their closing statements. We have some prepared questions and some questions that were emailed to us from readers. We will also be collecting questions. If you have a question, audience members, please write it on an index card available in the back and signal one of the volunteers to come and grab it, and they will bring it up to me and Jeremy. We will consolidate questions on the same subject and ask as many questions as time allows, but please understand that we will not be able to answer or ask every question. At the end, each candidate will have 3 minutes for closing statements. Out of respect for the candidates and others, let's agree that all audience members be polite, attentive, and as quiet as possible. Please, please silence your cell phones. We will start in alphabetical order by district, with candidate Dunbar giving his opening statement first. We will alternate who speaks during the questioning portion of the program. Candidate Dunbar.
First, a quick test. Is this coming through, or should I be closer? Good? Good. All right. Good evening. Thank you to our hosts, and thank you all for being here, and thank you to those online who are tuning in now or in the future. This is a debate, or a forum really, about our visions for Livermore. I'm Stephen Dunbar. I'm running for Livermore City Council, District 3, on a platform of a vibrant Livermore with 5 main goals: open and inclusive governance, transparency, vibrant neighborhoods, safe communities, and fiscal responsibility. With 4 years on the Planning Commission and a few years on the Asset Management Outreach Committee, those 2 experiences combined together to give me the skills to accomplish all of those goals as we go. I've had the experience of responding to tough questions on the Planning Commission and while meeting many of you in this campaign. There are real trade-offs to be made in the city of Livermore about our future. Some of them are beyond our control. Some of them are within our control. And the way we keep that control is with smart planning. Smart planning means objective design requirements. It means open and accessible trade-offs about what we are attempting to achieve. Vibrancy is the combination of openness, which is meeting the needs of the community, and opportunities. Opportunities for the community to be stable, to be part of the community, to thrive. My mom has a disability, specifically MS, and that affected her, but it also affected me growing up. It meant there were very specific things about my life that were different. I had to get myself around. As a planning commissioner, I've paid attention to all those little details, not just for people like my mom, but for everyone, because everybody sees that little thing in the community that could be a little bit better. Livermore's a great place, and we'll keep making it a great place with me on the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Farley?
Hello, is this on? Hello. All right, I'm Dave Farley. I'm running for Livermore City Council, District 3. We moved here in 2010. I'm a physicist at the National Labs. I've worked at both National Labs, Lawrence Livermore National Labs and Sandia National Labs. I work on clean energy and storage, nuclear nonproliferation, machine learning, quantum technology, and more. I also have my own small business in high technology. We currently have a contract with a historically black college and university in Maryland, where I'm standing up a quantum education technology program for African American students. Prior to coming here, I was a military officer. I have my PhD in engineering and physics from UC San Diego. I lived in Japan for 4 years. I stood up energy projects around the world for a decade. Community service here, I'm a commissioner for Livermore Airport, a position I won on merit based on my aeronautical engineering degree from Cal Poly and military flight time. I'm also a head coach for girls lacrosse at Granada High School. My priorities are: 1, smart energy development. Livermore does have a climate action plan, but there's a lot more to do. I'm ready to help from day one. 2, smart housing development. We can build all the houses required within the urban growth boundary, but it will require smart and innovative solutions. 3, public safety. For now, Livermore's pretty safe, but the East Bay is experiencing a crime wave. We are not immune. I fully support our law enforcement and public safety officials. And finally, fiscal responsibility. I believe in balanced budgets. I believe I'm by far the most qualified candidate for this position. My voters will be the only people that I'm beholden to. I will provide my full, unbiased, deep experience for the city of Livermore. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Kaskey.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Kaskey. I'm running for Livermore City Council District 3. Public service and volunteerism have really been a part of my pattern of life in Livermore since I've been here. My wide range of civic experience includes significant achievements. In my 8 years on Livermore's Historic Preservation Commission, the historic Southern Pacific Depot was not only restored, but we were able to have it once again serve as a transit depot in 2016. This was based on a proposal that I made to the city in 2006. I was also a member of the Downtown Steering Committee, which created the outreach materials for getting public input on downtown development, including hotel, public amenities, parking, and housing. As president of the Livermore Heritage Guild, I negotiated our management of Livermore's historic Hageman Ranch. We now open the ranch to the public every month. My work with those groups, as well as with the Livermore Cultural Arts Council, the Livermore Lions, the 4-H, the Livermore Valley Arts, have all had specific, positive, and measurable effects on our community. Not goals, but actual achievements. I decided to run for council after the city proposed breaking the urban growth boundary at Greenville. I will be a strong defender of the urban growth boundary. Council also needs to provide transparency and effective oversight into our government. As reported by the city in January, while preparing last year's budget, they found tens of millions of dollars of money that had been lost in the previous budget. Much of this was for the low-income housing fund. No council members asked what was done to make sure it does not reoccur, or how that money might improve our current low-income housing plans. On council, I will ask these important questions. We can resolve our challenges if we keep our discussions civil and less polarized than we have seen recently, and by respecting the voices of our community. I have been going door to door in our district, talking to thousands of residents. While they have concerns, they love Livermore and are more civil and thoughtful than we hear from city council. I'm committed to giving respect to those voices and working to resolve those challenges.
Thank you. Candidate Souls.
Hello, my name is Tom Souls. I'm running for City Council in District 4. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I got an education, went to work for General Electric Lighting for quite a few years in Cleveland, Ohio, and moved here in 2002 to work at Lawrence Livermore National Labs. Since then, I've been an expert witness, I've been a consultant, and I do a fair amount of volunteer work, some of it for Hageman Ranch, which was just mentioned. And also I have 5 2Ds from different countries, mostly China, and I just love them, and we have a very good time learning English. They learn English, I learn all about China. The reason I'm here, actually, is, well, I've been asked many times, because I write all these letters to the Independent, to run for council. And I said, no way, why in hell would I want that headache? And then a couple things happened. One was the turning down of the referendum by the city, not letting us vote on the city plan. And secondly, I happened to visit Cary, North Carolina, and I saw what a beautiful park in the center of Cary has done for the city. And it made me think, why the hell not Livermore? So that's the reason I decided to run. I am all for a very transparent government, a bottoms-up government. I don't have allegiance to anyone. I'm not a politician. but I really want the best for the city. I want a beautiful city. I want a safe city. That's why I'm here. It's no secret that I would like to move Eden Housing to a different location, to a place where it does need renovation.
Thank
like
you.
North-
I'm sorry, we need to move on, but Candidate Wang?
Thank you. I'm Kristie Wang. I'm running for City Council District 4. I'm a public policy professional who's worked to solve problems at all levels of government. I've been very active in our community, including working to combat youth vaping in 2018, and then getting elected to the Livermore School Board, where I'm finishing my 4th year. The work I've done in the community and my professional life are informed by my personal life experiences. I grew up as an immigrant English learner, working in my family's small business, translating for my parents. And these experiences have made me see the people who are not visible to most decision makers. And my husband and I have lived in the Tri-Valley for 25 years. And we bought a house in Dublin where we plan to raise our children. And they were only 2 and 4 years old when the overdevelopment in Dublin made it an undesirable place to live. And we were coming over here to Livermore, and we love the open space and the community that cares about measured, slow growth. And this was enough to make us leave the home we thought we were going to raise our children and to raise them here in Livermore. I'm running now because this is a time of great opportunity and challenges for Livermore. We are finishing the plan for our general plan development for the next 20 years. And we have to figure out how to meet state mandates on housing and maintain our aging infrastructure, our traffic and transportation, and our climate resilience. And I've the right leader right now. I've proven myself to be a very thoughtful, hardworking, elected leader who works with people in the community to solve problems for our schools. And I'll be ready on day 1 to work for a Livermore where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Thank you. Our first question will start with David Farley, District 3. And let's jump right in with downtown Livermore. And we might want to break this out into 2 questions about downtown because I want to focus first on the Eden Housing Project specifically. I mean, I remember sitting in the Livermore High School theater just down the street and asking a question about this back in our 2018 forum, and we're still unsure if we're really approaching the starting gate. So where are we now with this downtown affordable housing project in your estimation? What is your position on the project and moving it forward? And if you oppose this location but support the concept, please specify a realistic alternative piece of property on which to move Eden Housing.
All right, thank you very much for the question, and this is a hot topic, I think we all know, and as we're knocking on doors, it is a hot topic. People do talk about this. But also, I think we should clarify some of the terms, the conditions of this deal, this Eden Housing deal, because you hear different versions of it, let's say. So I went through and looked at Measure A1 from 2016, read all the details of the conditions. So my opinion is it was ill-conceived what the city proposed in the first place. If I was on council at the time, I would have advised not to do it downtown. I think it was ill-conceived. And let me tell you up front why I think that. I think it breaks the fairness barrier, and I'll explain that why. I think it becomes unfair when you look at the details of the conditions imposed on this project. But I think it's important to clarify some of the terms, all right? So what happened, for those of you who don't know, there was a bond measure from Alameda County for low-income housing, and there were various pots of money. One of those pots of money was competitive, where our region, which is Pleasanton, Livermore, and Dublin, competed for housing project proposals, where you could put forth what you thought would be a good low-income housing proposal to try to grab some of this money. The total money was around, I believe, $29 million, and we won, we shouldn't say we, the Eden Housing Project won $14.4 million of that bond money, along with the conditions that must be met to keep that money. 30 seconds already. Okay. It's a $60 million project. No one said it had to be downtown. What I differ with on it is the people you may have thought were qualifying, like teachers and firefighters, they make too much money. They won't be there, okay? People at the labs are leaving because they can't afford housing. It's not fair that very low-income people get the best property in the city, whereas people from the labs are leaving because they can't afford. I'd love to live downtown. I can't afford it.
Thank you. Next, Jeff Kaskey, District 3.
Same question? Thank you. Well, I will say, yes, I've been involved in this project off and on for, probably the better part of a decade. It will be a lot easier to resolve this if council members would stop making personal attacks on residents who present opposing views. If council starts with the assumption that anyone who disagrees with them is lying and spreading hate, then they're setting up a long-term fight, and that's what some of our council members have said, and that's what has happened. To change that, you need a council majority not tied to intolerant voices. There have been multiple different so-called approved plans for Eden, so changing the plan is easy when council wants to do it. Add to that the tens of millions of dollars we now have that we lost track of that I mentioned in my introduction, and a willing council with adequate funding could have both excellent public space and low-income housing in our downtown. For many years, the land immediately north of Railroad Avenue has been designated in the DSP as the North Side neighborhood, North Side downtown neighborhood, sorry. So housing in that area fits very well into our overall planning, not the vacant lots and the 50-year-old single-story abandoned retail that's currently on the site. So it will take work, but we can absolutely move forward. We can move forward quickly for a great downtown with inclusionary housing and great public spaces with a cooperative council and a little cooperation from the budget as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Souls, District 4.
Okay, well, basically, I'm sort of in agreement with both of the previous speakers. I've made no secret about it. I would like to see even more affordable housing, but not in that particular location. And Jeff has already mentioned north of Railroad is one location. The old Nob Hill area is another location. Both of those locations need renovation. They should have renovation. And this would be a good place for them. I'm also, I don't believe in free lunches. Somebody's got to pay for the difference between a certain low rent and market rates. I suspect it's not going to be the in lieu fees. I suspect it's going to be all of you as taxpayers in the end. And quite frankly, we have teachers and firemen and policemen in our own neighborhood. And if my son or daughter was a policeman or a teacher, I would advise them not to rent these places, because they're in a situation which, now that I'm a lot older, I realize I can't control. And that is, you get into a low rent situation, and today many people are in Section 8, they're in there for life. Rents will go up, cost of housing will go up. They would be better off, and I'm wholly in favor of this because Livermore has such a policy. They have a home ownership, affordable home ownership, something like that, so that people can get into a house, take advantage of the inflation, which we can't control. Our federal government is doing that. But anyways, I would love to help them in any way I can, and nobody should be out on the streets.
Thank you. Next, Kristie Wang, District 4.
Well, I support more affordable housing. We need it. Our biggest employers in Livermore say they need it for their workers, and it's a struggle for them to fulfill their mission. As a school board member, I see how difficult it is for us to recruit and retain young teachers when they can't afford a home here. And I see what a difference it makes when your teacher lives in the community, you see them at the grocery store, they're here on weekends and evenings, versus a teacher who has to rush out of here to get in the traffic to get home. half an hour away from Livermore. It really makes a difference for us to have our workers be able to live in our city. The Eden Housing Project was planned by a past council. It's been upheld by the courts, and the key policy decisions were made a long time ago. That land was bought with affordable housing funds, and the city has to put affordable housing there. And I want us to be able to move forward, and we can keep relitigating decisions that were already made, or we can figure out how we are going to move forward as a community. And that's what I'm interested in.
Thank you. Lastly, Stephen Dunbar, District 3.
5 things in total here from what I've heard. Not responding to, just trying to move through how I process this. The state of the lawsuit is that there were 2 lawsuits. There was one about the design and one about the development agreement. The development agreement said that we need to process the referendum. There was this acceptance of the referendum. There's a question to what is legislative and what is administrative. That's going to continue through the courts. That project did come to me on the Planning Commission, and I approved it because it met the requirements. That was my job on the... That can't be 2 minutes. That was my job on the Planning Commission, and I think the lawsuit related to that shows that I made the correct decision there. I do want to reset the conversation for this community. I think we do have to move forward to some degree because we are missing opportunities elsewhere. We are not getting through our general plan at the right pace. We are not getting through our objective design standards so we can make the next project better. There is a whole mess of legalities around the theory of moving it. I have not seen a plan that is actually functionally feasible. And even if it was, there are other state laws involved that make it incredibly risky. I do not want to lose control of the site either, and I think the site will be a positive site for the people that live there. But beyond that, I think that we are missing opportunities, and I've seen it on the Planning Commission, and I do want to reset the conversation and just continue to move this community forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going to do Downtown Part 2. And we're going to start with Jeff Kaskey, District 3. There are so many other aspects to this conversation about improving downtown and advancing the downtown-specific plan goals. The L Street parking garage, Blacksmith Square expansion, the proposed boutique hotel, supporting downtown businesses, and infrastructure improvements, just to name a few. What are the most critical elements for improving downtown to you, and how will you bring these top priorities to fruition on the council?
Wow. One of the things that City Council has to be good at is keeping a bunch of top priority things going at once. And so I don't believe that there's any one particular element of the downtown plan which is the top priority, but bringing our downtown together and finishing up our downtown, which was started wonderfully in 2004, is absolutely a goal of mine. I think the parking garages are important. I believe getting the hotel is important. All of these pieces are critical to getting the plan together. We've done a good job so far. People come, I met people visiting our wine country from Napa downtown. Figure that. So I think all of these pieces are important. I'm absolutely committed to working for all of them. I wouldn't prioritize any one over the other. I think it's very important that we do have our public in line with our city council, or perhaps I should say it the other way around, make sure that our city council is aligned with our public as we move forward. We've done some good outreach programs before. We can do some of that as well. But we are moving towards a great downtown. The Eden housing is actually, if you look at all the things going on in downtown, that's kind of a small bump in the whole project. We've got, we've added to the I Street garage, we're adding the L Street garage. The hotel is actually approved. The only thing we're waiting for is the hotelier to decide that it's the right time to start building. So there's nothing holding that up other than the hotelier. Each of these pieces is critical to turning our downtown into a place where our residents and our visitors feel like they really want to come visit. We're already partway there. We definitely have a downtown that is an envy of the area. So no, I don't have a single top priority. I want to get the downtown fixed and done.
Thank you. Next, Tom Souls, District 4.
Okay, I sort of second what Jeff said. I don't see one particular thing. I think the hotel is a good idea. The parking garage right now looks horrendous, but hopefully it will be much better. We have legacy housing on the other side. That's done, it's built. And if we would build up a nice area on Railroad, they would make a terrific frame for a nice park that everybody could enjoy. More like Cary than like what it could be. So I guess that's my answer.
Okay, thank you. Kristie Wang, District 4.
Yeah. So our downtown has changed a lot in the last 20 years. When my family and I first moved here, people went to Pleasanton to eat and to spend time if they wanted to be in sort of this downtown atmosphere. And now people from Pleasanton come to Livermore's downtown. And I hardly ever leave Livermore's downtown anymore. If you follow me on social media, you see I am down there all the time. And it's the restaurants, it's the retail, and it's also the multicultural arts festivals at Bankhead Plaza. I am at every single one because I love it down there. And one of the interesting things as I interact with the business owners downtown is that they're the ones I find in the city who are the most supportive of having housing downtown. They need that to keep their businesses going, to have people who can come home from work, park their car, and just get out and walk to dinner, walk to a show, walk to stores to browse and buy things. And I find them to be the most supportive of growth downtown, and I think we all understand the need for the hotel and hope to see that come to fruition soon. And I think past councils have done a really good job planning for downtown, and we hope to keep that going because I think that's really served the community well, and we all really like what's happening. I don't know if you've seen, there's some really exciting new restaurants coming that I've been checking out, and it's going to continue to do well.
Thank you. Steve Dunbar, District 3.
I do agree that the downtown plan is a cohesive document and there isn't one specific thing to do or change at this time. There are a couple of small things that I've been paying attention to that need some fixing along the way that we should be doing while we're doing the other things. I want to see a sign that shows the number of parking spaces before you already have started pulling into the garage. I want to see fixes to the curb radius at the corner of L Street and First Street. I want to see fixes to accessibility pieces that prevent everyone from enjoying downtown as it is today. Those little pieces will come together, and the larger items are already sort of in process. If we can complete those pieces and make it successful and get the new commercial coming in completed, I think that will also help the hotelier see financial feasibility, and that may help the hotel be completed as well. We are seeing some small business changeover in our downtown, some with a well-deserved retirement and others for other personal reasons. We need to make sure that those businesses stay open. You know, when fires occur, we need to get them repaired to the degree possible and support those businesses so that there is an opening and welcoming feel throughout the entirety from west to east. And hopefully with some more support as well with our economic development directors at Livermore, trying to get some folks into the bottom of the legacy building as well to extend the successful downtown a little further than it is today.
Thank you. And finally, David Farley, District 3.
Yes, I'm going to start off with a nice story. So I moved here, like I said, in 2010. We came from Princeton, New Jersey, where I was working on fusion energy out there. And I'm in the rental car that we got from Lawrence Livermore, and we were staying in a hotel somewhere in Pleasanton. And I put the family in the car and said, hey, we got to drop this off. There used to be a national car rental drop-off right there by Sandia on East. And we were driving through, and we knew we were going to buy a house somewhere. But literally, as we were driving towards Livermore, I said, hey, we're not buying anything in Livermore. We're just dropping off the car. This is a dusty cowboy town, this first street. There's a Thai restaurant there, it's pretty good, but other than that, there's no reason to come here. And as we were driving on First, I literally thought I was on the wrong street. Because I was here in the 90s at a postdoc, by the way. And I said, wow, something changed while I was gone for 10 years, and it was so much better. We looked everywhere. We went to 85 houses all through the Tri-Valley, and we picked here, in part because of the downtown. And we live near the fancy library, too, which is nice. As far as the future, what I've noticed is there seems to be a central, vibrant part of downtown, and it seems like it's done up better. The facade is nicer. As soon as you start trailing off east or west, it starts to get a little bit more, run down feeling. And that's also where you're seeing the turnover in the businesses. I think that facade should continue further east and west. Keep that same standard going and get those sorts of restaurants and retail in there. A dream of mine, which maybe on council I can do, I'd like to see at least part of First Street be a walking street, no cars at all. And rent out those parking spots to stalls, make more rental income from that. I don't think all the Harley Davidsons while you're trying to eat dinner is a good idea, or all the smog and the cars honking as they go through. So we might want to take a European view on this and maybe make a walking street at least part of downtown if we could do it.
Thank you. Next question, we will start with Tom Souls, District 4. And here's a question we got from a reader before tonight, and I don't know if I could have worded it any better. With Livermore's budget already allocated primarily to critical services, how would you ensure that new projects like safer streets, modern infrastructure, or added amenities are funded without increasing taxes or cutting essential services?
Well, first of all, I very much am in favor of a very safe town. And I'm not so sure it would require dramatic changes. We do need a good police force, and we have one. And they must be given the power to arrest people who walk in and take things out. And as I've been walking around, talking to people, handing out my brochures, I find that people are concerned about that. They are concerned about safety downtown. And I don't think this requires a huge amount of money. I haven't really talked about raising taxes. Taxes in California are already much too high. Our property taxes are too high, our income tax is too high. And people who'd like to come to work at the national labs, for example, I'm sure they do that calculation. And so I'm definitely against raising the taxes, but I am also very much in favor of keeping the character of the town. And I'm saying this not just for myself, I'm saying this because I've run into this as I go walking around. People are a bit concerned, some of them more than others, some of them vehemently concerned about the character of the town changing and modernizing, which would require a lot of money, and not necessarily what they want. They love the town. They loved the town in 2002 and 2010, and they're concerned now in 2024.
Thank you. Kristie Wang, District 4.
Well, the truth is budgeting is a challenge, and on school board, that's something I've learned a lot about. Most of the money, it goes to people, the people we need to keep our city going. In Livermore, our funding comes primarily from three sources: sales tax, property tax, and fees for service. And half of it goes right to the people who keep us safe, our first responders, police, and fire. And the truth is there isn't a lot of extra to go around. And so sometimes when people talk about why doesn't the city provide this or that or do all these things, there's not a lot of extra money. And so you have to be very disciplined and very careful and prioritize. And I think our city has done a good job of it. And we're, one of the issues that we're faced with now is planning for the maintenance of our aging infrastructure. As the city gets older, our roads, our buildings, our streetlights, all of these things start to age, and we need to take care of it. And our past councils have done a really good job identifying that and setting aside money and building a reserve to pay for these things. These things have to be planned long-term because we don't have a lot of extra. There are services we have to provide. We have to provide to pay salaries for our staff. And so bigger projects like that, you have to plan for in advance. And I think our councils and our staff have done a really good job managing that, and we have to keep that going. It's really important that we are very careful with our budget, and so I think we just have to continue what our councils have done.
Thank you. Next, Stephen Dunbar, District 3.
With a couple of years on the Asset Management Outreach Committee, I've been thinking about this a whole lot. And I've been talking with people at the farmers market years ago about the various trade-offs we have to make in our asset maintenance. There are things that we absolutely cannot let fail. And there are things that are maybe medium importance, and there are things that maybe are less important. We have not completely finished that asset management plan because we have not made those hard choices yet. We need to make them now, otherwise they only become harder for us down the line. There are other ways that we can fund these things that are nice to haves or things that improve the safety of the community overall. One is grants. We won some grants around town. One is objective requirements with new developments, like I spoke about earlier, so that we take advantage of the opportunities we have at the point that someone's already messing with the street. Same thing with city issues. When we're working to replace our sewers, or we're already fixing a curb ramp, or we're repaving the street, that is the opportunity for the highest level of efficiency. And I have the record of doing that. I've been doing that for years by emailing staff at the right time to say, hey, you could make that crosswalk a little bit better because you're already repaving that street, and it's the marginal cost of paint. There's structuring the work to get competitive contracts. If you structure the work into small pieces, your contracts aren't going to be as competitive, and you may have to pay more overall. So if we structure all of our work together, that means we can make cost efficiencies. And lastly, using that budget surplus that we have, or I shouldn't even say surplus, the extra budget that we have right now that needs to be used to pay down our asset debt, because we do have asset management debt. That'll reduce the random expenses in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. David Farley, District 3.
Right, so let me just start off on budgets overall. So as you may have seen in the paper recently, or if you study other outlets, we're in a pretty good place as far as budgets. If you saw, Pleasanton is on a bad trajectory, right? They're losing money, and they have to make a quick turnaround and cut costs. And surprisingly, Dublin has this massive amount of money, which is rather surprising to learn about. But it's all about priorities, and let's just be clear. On council, we set policy. We don't decide exact things to be worked on, right? We set policy. The person who does the job is the CEO of Livermore, which is the city manager, which is Mary Ann. She's in charge of figuring that out. We provide policy. So for example, you may know the city of Livermore has 32,000 broken sidewalks to fix, all right? Each one of those costs $1,000 to $10,000 to fix. You may have seen them. It's where they shave the edge off the concrete. Do the math, that's $30 to $300 million just to fix sidewalks, which we're obviously not going to do. So as councilmen, and women, what we need to do is set the policy and let Mary Ann do her job, okay? And so my policies are public safety, for sure. You want to see property values go down, let crime go up. I talked about smart energy development. We need to keep working on that. I've got all the qualifications to help guide policy on that and work with our sustainability manager and Mary Ann to do that right. Housing, we have to do housing right. And finally, we do have $3 billion in city assets that have to be maintained, right? But all cities have this problem. It's a matter of priorities. And as we heard before, a lot of it's labor cost, okay? And those are things you can kind of control through attrition, but it's hard to cut people. So it'll be tough choices on which infrastructure projects Mary Ann should be tackling, but we can provide the priorities such as public safety, clean energy development, and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Jeff Kaskey, District 3.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so Livermore was voted recently by one agency in the top 20 safest suburbs in the country, within a certain size, some other caveats, but we're doing pretty darn well. Now, that doesn't come for free. In Livermore, our police budget is the largest piece of our budget is about $40 million, and our fire budget is something like $25 million. So we put a fair amount of money into it, but you know what? We're doing pretty darn well. If you want to see a comparison, look around elsewhere in the county and beyond. So I'm not going to suggest major changes. I think we're doing pretty well. I do think there are some tweaks that we can do. Let's see if we can make it a little better. One of the things that we don't see very much, and I hear this a lot as I walk through the neighborhoods, is they don't see the police presence coming through their neighborhood. I'd like to see them bicycling through, but I'll take it if they want to drive through or walk through. Let's see a police presence in the neighborhood. Also, safety takes many forms. It's not just the police, it's not just fire. It can have to do with traffic calming. Traffic, as I'm sure you must imagine, is a big concern of everybody in Livermore, but in particular if they're near some of the bigger streets, College and East Avenue and those things along the girl streets. So I think you'll find that if we can handle some traffic issues with traffic calming, also traffic lighting, and I mean street lights. There are many stretches, including on East Avenue, that the residents say are very dark. They feel unsafe, both as part of traffic and just unsafe as pedestrians. Solar lighting now is extremely inexpensive. That's the sort of thing that we can drop in. Absolutely, the maintenance budget on its own, we talked a little bit about that. That's a little farther from the question, but we can definitely be looking at the maintenance budget, not just looking at what sacrifices, but looking at smarter ways, using machine intelligence, using computer intelligence to figure out what's the best way that we meter out our resources. And finally, I'll put a quick line in to say we could also, just as we did with our fire department, look at partnering with our neighborhood communities for some of the larger tools for maintenance.
Thank you. We're moving on to question 4, and this will go to Kristie Wang, District 4. What is your vision for the future of the Livermore Municipal Airport? Are there any ideas that should be off the table, in your view, when it comes to potential changes or more development at the airport?
Well, as I understand it, the city's policy is that the airport will meet existing demand and won't expand. I know there have been issues with some of the neighbors over the use of leaded fuel, over noise, and even people who live, to me, a surprisingly far distance from the airport are affected by activity at the airport because people will practice flights quite a distance away. And so it's important that while the airport is very important to the community in a lot of ways, it contributes to our economic vitality, our public safety. There are some educational uses at the airport that are really great for our students. But the airport also needs to work to be a good neighbor to both the people who live in Livermore and also our neighboring cities. I think I know the city has been responsive to the concerns about leaded fuel and is working to get the unleaded fuel there. I would support efforts to improve the health and safety of the people who live near it. But as I understand it, the city's plan is to not expand the use of the airport, but just to meet current demand.
Thank you. Stephen Dunbar, District 3.
The first thing to understand is the limits of what we can do. The airport is under FAA rules for funding that was provided before. It is a separate line item in the budget known as it's a specific fund that has to fund itself. I forget the exact terminology for it.
Enterprise.
I'm sorry?
As we know, we're undergoing a review right now for what might change with the airport, but we need to understand what the limits of what we can do are first. Because if we don't understand those limits, we can't really have an effective communication with the community about what their trade-offs are. That's what we actually want to have. I do think that it goes without saying that we would need a study on noise and safety and air quality and human health for any changes that are made. But I, broadly speaking, think that the airport as it's sized today meets the needs of the community and meets the requirements of the FAA. We do have to see exactly what the limitations of the FAA are moving forward, but that's, broadly speaking, where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you. David Farley, District 3.
All right, so I am a commissioner for Livermore Airport. I'm also a former military pilot, so I know a few things about airplanes and about airports. It is true that FAA regulations rule the day, not necessarily what local residents might prefer. I can tell you from the commission, and it's all open source information, but we get literally hundreds of noise complaints per month, and almost all of them come from 2 houses in Pleasanton. And so it's not a whole lot we can do about that, but we do log all those numbers. And just to let you know, wind dictates which runway gets used, and you can only go that way. It's not up to the pilot. So if winds are dictating flying over a certain Pleasanton house, there's no 2 ways about it. It's just the way it is. There is I would say, voluntary rule not to do noisy ops after 10 p.m. It's not a law. It does happen, but people do try to keep the noise down after 10 p.m. I'm all for unleaded fuel or other types of fuels that might be better. We just have to remember that not all planes are ready for that, and there are FAA regulations. As far as a bigger airport, I don't think anybody's talking about like a Sacramento airport or even any sort of commuter airline, even a small airline. I don't think anybody's talking about that. And obviously bigger airplanes would require an extension of the runway, which I can't see that ever happening either. And finally, let me just say that a pilot can file a flight plan to do whatever they want. They could take off out of Livermore and go to Mexico if they wanted to. We don't control that, right? We do have some military flights that come in. We can't really control that either. But there's very few of those jets coming in. The main noise is actually corporate jets, and we don't have that many of those as well. So as far as the future, I could be in favor of some sort of research type things, low-rise research near the airport, but that's about it.
Thank you. Jeff Kaskey, District 3.
Sure. So I do want to address a little bit the fuel. We do have the ability now, there's a fuel out there, GAME G100UL, that is approved for the use in all of these planes that are currently using the low lead fuel. So we do have the option to do that. We need to nudge our airport to make sure that they include that fuel. They currently include another unleaded fuel, which is usable in about 60-some% of current piston engines. This is only the piston engines. Jets don't use that kind of fuel at all. But you asked about the future, and I think the future is actually pretty exciting for the Livermore Airport. We have seen, I don't know more than you've seen in the news, but we've seen that there's a business looking to do an electric airplane shuttle out of Livermore Airport. I don't expect that that's suddenly going to be carrying tens of thousands of people, but it's a great piece of research. It's a great indicator of the possible ability of converting our planes, some of our planes, out of fossil fuels into electric planes, same as we're looking to do in our cars. This is a technology that's going to take some time to develop, and it wouldn't be great to start developing it here in Livermore, where we've got a lot of the technology over at the labs and a number of other places. Likewise, there are people studying hydrogen. Hydrogen is a fuel for fuel cells, another renewable resource that we can be using to replace our current leaded and unleaded hydrocarbon fuels. So I think the future of the Livermore Airport is really interesting. I think the sound question is one, as we've heard, there are some challenges with what we can actually do. However, the city recently, I believe last year, installed some much better logging of the noise. So we could actually track the noise per plane and correlate it to weather, correlate it to wind, correlate it to the things that would allow us to decide, is there just one, I mean, there's maybe only 2 houses that complain, maybe there's only 2 pilots that we have to talk to. I don't know. But we have the data that we can now start looking at, and I think we need to approach that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, Tom Souls, District 4.
Okay, I won't pretend to be an airport expert. In fact, I would like to see us use electric bikes before we try to electric planes. Which, by the way, they use in China all over the place, and they work very well. As far as the airport is concerned, my understanding is it's a pretty good moneymaker. And particularly if some commercial flights do go to that airport. Where we lived in Cleveland, there was an airport very close to our house, and it did handle some commercial planes, not a lot, and it wasn't a big airport. But, you know, that's a trade-off. It's sure, they do make some noise. And if you're right on the flight path, you're going to hear them. If you're not, then my only problem in Cleveland was those guys who, just for the heck of it, would fly around in circles over our house. And I used to think, boy, if I only had a 22, I could take one of them out. But we do need commercial flying, and it is a moneymaker. So I'll leave it to the experts to figure out how to handle that.
Thank you. And we'll stay on the subject of moneymakers, potentially. Stephen Dunbar, District 3, will answer first. What ideas do you have to promote economic development in the city? Please approach the question as it applies to small and medium-sized businesses across Livermore, as well as larger companies and retailers with a strong presence here.
So this is a fun one for me because I didn't even say it in my introduction, but I work for Gillig, making transit buses here in Livermore. And yes, they are a larger employer, but we moved out here because we didn't have space in Hayward anymore. All the buses were literally 2 inches from each other down the production line, and there was no conveyor belt. We moved out here because we found a space that met our needs. We found a space that was actually large enough to accommodate us. It's the same game for small businesses and medium businesses. They need a space that fits their needs. It's not necessarily true. We may have a lot of industrial area, but it may be the wrong size. It may not be subdivided in the right way. That's the thing we need to pay attention to from the zoning level of the city. The other piece, of course, is how to incentivize people to start small businesses and get involved. Some of that is related to just upstart funding. Sometimes we've talked about how impact fees can kind of get in the way, and I've talked to some small businesses that struggle to pay it up front, but they think they have a successful business and they'll pay it back over time. Those are some ways that we can encourage small businesses to be part of the community. We've got really great resources with the innovation space in iGate and Innovation Tri-Valley out here, encouraging people to come out here. And those are often startups with smaller numbers of people that grow into larger businesses. And we want to make sure that they have spaces to grow from one place to another, in fact, as well. I think that those are some highlights for how I approach that. But certainly the character of the community is all of these wonderful businesses that give people opportunities for a stable income here in Livermore so that they can be a part of the community overall. So we don't take that for granted.
Thank you. David Farley, District 3.
Yeah, hi. So as I said at the beginning, I do have my own small business, high technology business. I've had it for a long time. It was more active before I came back to the labs because they try to keep you focused on the labs and not on your small business. But I've been doing this for a long time. As I said, we have a contract with a Morgan State University, an African-American school doing quantum technology there. One thing I'll tell you from the labs, I have a lot of colleagues who have retired or are about to retire who basically have machine shops in their garage. They want to work, but they're not the sort of people who want to do a startup. They don't want to go form an LLC. They'd love to be a part of something. And I like to facilitate that happening as a policy person on the council. I'll just add as well, the labs, not just our lab, Department of Energy has literally billions of dollars of worth of intellectual property sitting on the shelf. that could be used. The problem is we need know-how on how to leverage that IP, right? It's not the type of IP that you just grab off the shelf and do. You need expertise. You need retirees from the labs to help you get that going. I'd like to facilitate connecting retirees who are very capable and ready to go with more of these younger people maybe who want to do the startup culture, but they need an expert. And the other thing I want to mention, housing is kind of like the gorilla in the room, right? The cost of housing is really out of control here. I can't afford my own house if I showed up today. I think most of us are in the same boat. Certainly my kids can never afford to live here. Unfortunately, it's supply and demand. If you create big company jobs here, they all want houses. That increases demand for housing. It makes it worse. So we have to have a compromise. If you want housing prices to go down, we could build 100 houses, we could build 1,000, we could build 5,000. The price per square foot is not coming down. There's too much demand within an hour drive.
Thank
We
you.
have to be careful.
Thank you. Jeff Kaskey, District 3.
Thank you. I'm going to agree a bit with David over here. I think we have the labs, and when I was at the lab, okay, a few centuries ago, when I was at the lab, we had a technology transfer department where technology that was developed within the lab, if it was determined that it wasn't being used for a program at the time, could be shipped outside. In fact, we had one employee who developed a particular controller for liquid nitrogen. They decided not to manufacture at the lab, so at 5:01, he would step outside, step into the technology transfer department, get the same drawings that he had just created, and started his own business. And it worked very well. So, as David mentioned, it's pretty straightforward for these technical people to build, to design, to do software. What we don't have, along with our technology transfer, is a business transfer. And I think that that's where these potential entrepreneurs, potential new business people could use some help. We have a lot of catalysts. We just mentioned the lab. Obviously, Stephen mentioned Gillig. We also have Monarch doing electric tractors. Obviously, we have Tesla. I talked earlier about the electric planes. We are a community that is really rich in the kind of technology that can develop very interesting businesses right here. There is no particular reason for our people to be driving over the hill or taking the train over the hill, as I did on the ACE train, to the Silicon Valley. We have the technology and we have the people here. I do think, I'm going to agree again, with the notion that the difference between developing a business and developing a technology is large. I'm also a small businessman. I have a very small business, and the difference between what I need to do to make my product and what I need to do to sell my product is actually a really big difference. And so I believe that that's the kind of thing that can be incubated here in town through our businesses, and we can develop some very interesting businesses based on the technologies that are here today, from the lab, from these other companies at the airport, from the tech. We've got Lam up north, we've got Form Factor. So we have a real basis for this technology, and starting up the small companies and the medium-sized companies should be fairly straightforward from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Souls, District 4.
Hi, yeah, I love this topic because I really firmly believe that private industry is absolutely necessary in this city. It needs to be responsible, needs to be done carefully, but we've already heard about Gillig and Lam, and these are great companies, and we have the development on one side of 84, and we have other development north of the lab, technical companies. By the way, one thing Jeff didn't mention is you need business expertise, but you also need manufacturing expertise. So something built in the lab doesn't translate itself to a product. You have to develop the manufacturing. And Gillig has done that, and Lam has done that. And so my feeling is if a city isn't growing, and it isn't growing in its technological economy, it's going the other way. It's dying. And we don't have to look very far to Fremont or Hayward or any of these other cities to realize what happens when a city isn't growing. We are lucky here in Livermore. We've got space and we've got technology, and I'm all in favor of both of those growing. You're not going to be able to buy any kind of a house if you don't have a good job. And these companies like Lam will provide good jobs. And so I'm in favor of it. It just needs to be done responsibly and with care, not to overrun the city. And I think that's happening north of the lab and on the other side of 84.
Thank you. Kristie Wang, District 4.
Well, to attract businesses to a city, there are some things that are within the city's control and some things that are not. And if we're talking about medium-sized businesses or even a little larger, the first question is space. Is there room in the city for the amount of space that they need? Is it zoned in a way that would allow them to be able to move their business there? Public safety is an important factor, and if we're talking about retail and those kinds of things, that's definitely an issue. And then can they get the labor, the workforce that they need here? And that's where, as we said, affordable housing is important, that the kind of workers they need to run their business will be able to live here. And then there's, in a smaller way, any fees that they have to pay to set up the business and to keep it going. That's another area where the city may have some leeway, although probably not much, because the city sets its fees to provide the service and it isn't making a profit on it. I think, I know from, like I said, I spent a lot of time downtown. A lot of the businesses there, it can be a struggle to keep it going, and it's just expensive. Rents are high, and the fees they have to pay, and paying their labor, those labor costs keep going up. And so it's not easy for sure, and I think it's important for us to be in close touch with our business owners, and I think the city does a good job of that, to hear what the concerns and challenges are that they face, and to see how we can address it and be creative in the ways that the city can work to keep our businesses here and to attract new businesses.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question, which David Farley, District 3, will answer first. The conversation around homeless support continues to confound officials in California, and it's a conversation that is changing in recent months when it comes to clearing out encampments. What should the Livermore City Council do to address the need for social services and to help those in need of housing in our community?
Good question. So let me just start off with saying, and I think all of us on the table here know this, I don't know if everybody knows this. So Livermore has 4 facilities for homeless people or people displaced from housing, but Dublin and Pleasanton don't. So there's a question of fairness here as well. Should we be bearing all the load? That's one question. And as council member, I'd be asking that question and wanting to interact with our sister cities on that topic. It's a tough problem. I think what we're talking about, if you look at Berkeley and parts of San Francisco, if you go to San Francisco, there are very nice areas that are lined up with broken down RVs on the street, and they're not moving. When APEC came here about 6 months ago to San Francisco, they cleared them all out somehow. But once these get established, it's really hard to remove an encampment. So one priority as councilman would be to not let that fester. Once we start seeing more of it, more RVs, more signs of encampments, tents by the freeway, we have to attack it right away before it becomes a permanent fixture. As far as money, one thing I'm a little bit troubled by, Vineyard 2.0, everybody slaps their hands on their back after that, saying what a great idea it was. It was $1 million per room to build that, okay? So do some math. If we have about 220 homeless in Livermore, and that place costs $22 million, that's a $100,000 check per homeless person. Okay, you can do a lot of mental health. There's a lot you can do with that kind of money. So I question some of these facilities that the other cities aren't doing, and we are, and it's very, very expensive. I'm not convinced it's as helpful as other ways we could use our money. And one last thing, I actually know the woman at Sausalito who wrote $30,000 checks to every homeless in Sausalito if they promised to leave. I'm not saying we should do that, all right, but I'm saying there are other options besides just build, build, build at very expensive
Thank you.
rates.
Thank you very much. Jeff Kaskey, District 3.
Thank you. I'm going to say that homelessness isn't a problem. Homelessness is the result of 1,000 problems. And sometimes they're mental health problems. Sometimes somebody just had a problem in their relationship. Sometimes somebody does have trouble following the rules. Sometimes somebody's job was just canceled. So solving homelessness isn't going to be something that we solve with one particular thing. It's true, Livermore does have a number of homeless facilities. It's also true from the point in time count that Livermore also has the most homeless people. I'm not one of those people who thinks that the reason we have all the homeless is because we have homeless facilities, but perhaps the other way around. And so we do have some responsibility to handle that. I also completely agree that partnering with our neighborhood communities is something we absolutely should be working on. I'll note, by the way, that the folks in Dublin have started to step up. They have some more facilities, and they're working on some additional health facilities as well. So I think that we can do things, and the city of Livermore is doing things. Let's make sure to give credit for what they're working on. They are doing partnerships. They have partnered with the creation of Vineyard 2.0. We've got the tiny homes out at Crosswinds Church. So they are doing many projects. We also have, of course, Open Heart Kitchen and a number of other groups that are working there. However, I believe that there are still things that this city can be doing that are not particularly expensive. We can be looking at, as we used to have a long time ago for a short period of time, and other communities have done, is safe parking. Safe parking is a very simple procedure. Well, simple, it does take some resources, that promotes stability. And it's the stability that allows people who can to get out of homelessness. It allows people the ability not to worry about whether they're going to be able to shower this week, where they're going to get their food, where they're going to do their laundry, to be able to plan a little farther ahead. So safe parking, other services that we can do that are supportive to get people, to meet people where they are, and to get them more stable so that they can help move themselves up. There are certainly people who aren't going to be able to benefit from that, and that's a whole other conversation. Stop.
Thank you. Tom Souls, District 4.
Yes, I don't have a solution for this. It really tugs at your heart when you see somebody who does not have a place to stay. I worked at Open Heart Kitchen. Yes, they would let them stay overnight, and they could stay for a while. They could get all the food they needed. In fact, we served them very well, actually. But it is a terrible thing. And I will say that the churches are doing the best job. And the federal government does have its Section 8 housing, which many of you know about. And I have known people on Section 8 housing, which says that they won't pay more than 30% of whatever income they have, which may be nothing more than a Social Security check, for their rent. And they can take this voucher to any landlord who will accept the Section 8 housing. The landlord will get something like market rent, and you know who will pay the difference, of course. So there is no easy answer to this. I was just reading about homelessness in China. They have very little homelessness. What they do is when somebody is homeless in a place like Chengdu, is they just send them back to their village that they came from, and it disappears. The homelessness disappears. So it's a big problem. It's a very sad thing, and anything we can do, either privately or publicly, to help alleviate that, I'm in favor of.
Thank you. Kristie Wang, District 4.
It's important to note that while the homeless shelters in the Tri-Valley are in Livermore, we have a regional approach to social services in the Tri-Valley. We partner with Dublin, Pleasanton, our county, and our nonprofits to provide these services. Livermore is not bearing the financial cost alone. There was recently or just this year, a Tri-Valley Human Services Needs Assessment was completed, and this is the first one since 2011, and it identifies the services that we're providing, what the need still is, and we're making sure that we're supporting the people throughout the Tri-Valley, and it's an investment from all the cities and the county and our nonprofits and some who are in this room. I've visited the Vineyard Resource Center, and it's not just the people who are housed there who are being helped. There is food there, there are mailboxes there are showers there, they provide clothing, they provide mental health support. So many people are being helped at these places. It's not just the people who are living in the units that are on the property. It's very hard to get these projects built, and yes, they're expensive, and that's why we have to work at the same time to keep people from falling into homelessness. We have to provide that support as well before that happens. And this is something that's very important to me. I've spent more than 13 years working on the crisis hotline for Tri-Valley Haven. I take a shift every week. Once a week at night, I am the person people call when they need somewhere to go. I've spent a lot of time in those 13 years on the phone with unhoused people in the middle of the night, and many of whom are women and children. I hear kids screaming in the car or a baby crying, and I have to help them figure out where they can go for the night. This is something that's very important to me. So it's something, yeah, we are working to address this.
Sorry. Aren't you glad it's 2 minutes? Next, Stephen Dunbar, District 3.
I'll start with a personal story from Livermore, which is me biking home from work at about 8 p.m. underneath the Stanley Boulevard Marietta trail intersection. And there were some kids walking up the trail, and they stopped me. They started picking at all the stuff on my bike like they were going to take stuff off. And the homeless person who lives under the bridge there yelled at them and got them to leave me alone. And then they went after, beat up on him, and then the police were called. I think it was already said that all the stories are individuals. They all have individual needs, individual problems, individual circumstances for how they got there. So it is difficult to provide everything, but we do have a plan. We have our housing element, and the portion of that deals with homelessness and homeless services. And some of the strategies have already been mentioned, and I won't repeat them. We know that many of them are from here. I think 75 or 80% literally were from here, and a higher proportion have ties here from family or otherwise. What we can do is work with all our partners, as has already been said. Local partners, Tri-Valley partners, regional partners, state partners, and federal partners. As we know, a lot of the services funding comes from the county, in fact. And so we have to make sure we're in touch with the county very frequently to make sure that we're getting the resources, because sometimes it gets assumed that we don't have needs out here in the Tri-Valley, but we definitely do, because we see it every day. And as also been said, prevention is many, many more times more effective than getting someone out of homelessness. All that being said, to a lot of degree, homelessness is a housing problem. Housing is extremely expensive, and guess what? The people that are here lost their house because the house was extremely expensive. I've talked with people on my walks who live in a duplex and may not be able to make it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Jeff Kaskey, District 3. How closely are you following the Measure II vote next door in Dublin, which has to do with the Dublin Boulevard extension and potential commercial development of the land that is now an open space buffer between Livermore and Dublin? What's your position on that issue from Livermore's perspective, as well as your position on other urban growth boundary related subjects on Livermore residents' minds, including the so-called East of Greenville project?
Thank you. If my Dublin answer goes long, let me first say I'm a complete defender of the urban growth boundary, and I've already spoken in front of City Council and Planning Commission against the breaking of the urban growth boundary on the east of Greenville. Having to do with the Dublin plan, we have a little bit more of a challenge because the land is between us and Dublin. Dublin is the one that's looking to break the urban growth boundary, not Livermore. Dublin is actually asking for something rather even more insidious than simply putting a project outside their urban growth boundary. What they're asking the voters to do is to approve allowing the Dublin City Council to decide where and what kind of a plan it wants to do outside the city boundaries, so outside their urban growth boundary. So this is a different thing than saying, we'd like to build this project, please vote on it. This is just give us the authority. We'll have your needs at heart, promise we will. And in particular, you can take a look at the name of the initiative. It's something like the Clean Air and Open Space Preservation Act, when what they're doing is using up open space, of which a small part they will preserve, and therefore they're calling it an open space preservation measure. I think by my tone, you can tell that I'm dramatically against it. The question is, what do we do? And obviously, Livermore has already indicated that they would not go ahead with the piece of, with funding the piece of the road that had been part of the agreement before they talked about doing the industrial development. So Livermore would withhold their fees, their funds. Also, Livermore, there are people suing Dublin at this moment because they don't believe that the way they're trying to break that the rules to open the urban growth boundary is legal. We will see how that proceeds. That won't hit the courts until after the election. So this is going to be tough. Livermore, if the courts don't succeed in stopping it, Livermore is going to have to find a way to negotiate with Dublin and work out a method to keep them from breaking their urban growth boundary and developing in our open space.
Thank you. Tom Souls, District 4.
Okay, well, I won't claim to be an expert on this, but if Dublin wants to break its urban growth boundary, I think that's Dublin's problem, not Livermore's problem. Livermore should do what Livermore wants to do, and I know they want to keep as much open space as possible, but I don't know what they can do if, in fact, Dublin decides they want to extend things, except, of course, as Jeff pointed out, they don't have to build their section of Dublin Boulevard, and that makes it kind of silly because you drive down Dublin Boulevard and all of a sudden you stop at the Livermore border. That wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. My feeling in general about these things, I agree. I want to defend the urban growth boundary. But if somebody discovers gold on the other side of Greenville, I'm going to be the first person wanting to go over there. So I think there's, you have to look at this and say, if we don't need to break the urban growth boundary, let's not do it. But if there's some overriding reason to do it, at least in the case of Greenville, which is just huge amounts of land, consider it, study it.
Thank you. Kristie Wang, District 4.
Well, I'm disappointed that Dublin has put this initiative on the ballot to break the urban growth boundary. Currently, Dublin has an agreement with Livermore to jointly develop a road on what is currently county land. And I would like Dublin to honor that agreement. If the voters do pass this initiative, then this will be the beginning of a long process, and there'll be a lot of opportunities for the two cities to work together. And my hope is that Dublin will honor that agreement with Livermore, because currently what they want to annex would be county land that's between Dublin and Livermore. And if they do successfully annex that land, there will no longer be a buffer between Dublin and Livermore. And we know our two cities have very different ideas about land use and about development. I left Dublin for that reason. And so we would not like to see them come right up to the Livermore border. Currently, as I said, we have an agreement to jointly build this road. But if they annex that land, and that land is no longer county road, but Dublin is no longer county property, but becomes Dublin property, Livermore would not pay money to help develop a road that's outside of our city limits, or within another city's limits. So my hope is that this measure doesn't pass, and if it does, that Dublin will work with Livermore to honor the agreement that we have.
Thank you. Stephen Dunbar, District 3.
Yes, I've been working on this issue with a local environmental nonprofit. Yes, the buffer is important. We are an independent city. We are not LA. That independence is a part of the character of the community, and so we should work to keep it. Lots has already been discussed about the technicalities of it. In particular, Dublin wants to give themselves the ability to approve it and the ability to approve the EIR themselves, rather than having an EIR before with all the details worked out, which is unacceptable in my view. There have been studies about the funds, and this is where I get into negotiations with Dublin, about what it actually costs to build this road, right? They gave a gross income estimate from all of the development that would be built alongside it, not a net income development. So they're not accounting for all the costs of the road and the cost of the infrastructure that would be required to support that. So why would we do that without a full accounting of what Dublin would even get? And that's something that I'd like to talk with Dublin about. To some degree, the road is larger than it needs to be because of all the industrial they plan to build. They're building it 6 lanes wide up to the end of their territory, and then 4 lanes through the rest of the way with turn lanes on each corner. I'm in the weeds with this because I think it really matters. But out of the weeds is LAFCO. That is the committee at the regional level that decides on where the boundaries are. And that is really important, and it's a bigger point where these subcommittees that the city council serves on are really vibrantly important because they are all those little regional cooperation details that matter. It is Wheels Bus, it is the Tri-Valley Transportation Commission, it is LAVCO, and all those other committees that matter. The way we negotiate with Dublin will be through those committees, and I think part of it is monetary and part of it is technical to get the best results for Livermore.
Thank you. David Farley, District 3.
Let me just start off with urban growth boundary in Greenville. I'm against breaking the boundary east of Greenville, and the previous plans were about light commercial. Again, we have a housing problem, we don't have a jobs problem. You create more demand, housing will not go down in price. So it's just a fundamental compromise. I'd love to do both, but we can't. So there's no need to do a Greenville expansion. As far as this particular topic, I think it just highlights a fundamental difference between Livermore and Dublin. It's just a fundamental difference. As we know, Dublin thinks expansion is fine, and for them, maybe it is. But here, we don't think it's fine, right? We don't want to do what Dublin has been doing and wants to continue doing. But now we're sort of at each other's edges here, right? So for me, I don't support the measure. I do support some sort of connecting of the cities. I don't mind an alternate besides the 580 to get from one to the other, for example. But I do not support this sort of large encroachment onto the open space that defines what Livermore is and what Dublin isn't, right? So yeah, that's my view on that. And since I have a couple seconds left, let me just go back to the hydrogen planes. Just as a coincidence, I wrote the paper at Sandia for doing hydrogen airplanes. It's in the queue right now. And also what's kind of coincidental is if you look at the climate action plan, one of the reasons they're behind on their hydrogen is because they're waiting for an MOU from Sandia. Well, guess what? All you have to do is elect me, and you get all of that. So anyhow, I just think that we need to maintain our identity in Livermore, and these sorts of things like breaking the urban growth boundary, allowing Dublin to do what they're proposing to do, just is a stark contrast from what we want. And on council, it's our position to try to maintain what the people of Livermore actually want and stand up against what Dublin may want to try to do.
Okay, thank you. The next question, we're going to start with Tom Souls, District 4. We are going to give each candidate a chance to speak directly to their district constituents. What do you think is the most important issue in your district, and how will you work to solve it?
Wow, that's a pretty tough question. But I will just try to reflect what people have told me. And I think I've heard it a lot in this, in the discussions here. I think people want a clean, good, safe Livermore. And if Dublin wants to build, well, it's, 10-story apartment buildings, fine, it's Dublin's problem. But we here in Livermore have a nice community. We want it to stay that way. We want it to be safe. We want it to be beautiful. And that's that's my only reason for being here, to try to support people in doing that. I don't know what more I can add to that, except to say that I think, well, of course, you know I would like to have that lovely park downtown, but there are other things that are needed too. Those small businesses, my dad owned a small business, he owned a service station, and it routinely got broken into. And it would be broken into at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he'd wake me up, and we'd go in his little Jeep to the service station to put a big plywood board over the window that they had broke. I knew all the tricks: leave money in the cash register, leave the safe open, this kind of thing. It's not easy. It's absolutely not easy. And it's very easy for a city to go in the wrong direction. I want it to stay in the right direction and remain the city that, well, when I came here shortly after 2002, they built those nice trellises. It had a lovely downtown, still a lovely city. And that's about all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Kristie Wang, District 4.
Well, I've actually spent a good amount of time in the last few months knocking on strangers' doors in my district, and primarily to get a sense of what people are feeling in District 4. And actually even starting in March, when I was talking about running for council and had hosted some what I call listening sessions to talk to people in District 4 to understand their issues. And I will say I've been surprised. Granted, I'm meeting with people who own homes because they have a doorbell for me to ring. But the homeowners in District 4 are largely quite happy where they are. And my question every time is always, what are your concerns? Do you have questions? What are the things that you're worried about? What would you like to see the city do? And largely, people are pretty satisfied and happy with the direction the city is going in, the things that have happened here in the last 20 years or so. Most people, I would say, who I've interacted with have been here between 20 and 40 years. I think some have fears about where things might be going. They're happy with things up to now, and they're concerned about where it's going. And I think we're all wanting to maintain the character of what Livermore is and this sort of small town feel. I'm always surprised when I go to events and I meet people elected people from other cities, that we're a relatively large city, because it doesn't feel that way. It feels like a small town. I feel like I know everybody in the city. I know I don't, but it has that feeling, and we all want to preserve that, and we want to preserve that in how we use our land and how the city makes decisions about it. So I would say generally in District 4, people are quite happy with things and would like to see things continue in this way.
Thank you. Stephen Dunbar, District 3.
As was said, this is directly to our district. Hi, District 3. For those of you that don't know me, good to meet you. For those of you who already know me, good to see you again. This question is a two-part question, really, because as was stated at the very top of this program, council members for a district actually represent the whole city. They have to keep in mind the needs of the whole city. So in speaking to the needs of the whole city, I do think that we're trying to lower the volume with where we've been over the last few years, bring down the contention level and move forward. And we do that by listening, of course, but avoiding what I call the black box problem, where your input goes into a black box and comes out the other side and is responded to generally, but not specifically. And that hurts because you don't feel heard. I think I'm pretty practiced at dealing with that on the Planning Commission. It takes a lot of effort to do it from the dais, but it's possible, and I'll try my best as a council member. For District 3 in particular, what I hear knocking doors is that they know after a conversation that we can't stop all change. Livermore has changing needs, and there are requirements that we must meet, but they want to keep the feel of their neighborhoods and their community the same while still trying to meet the needs of housing affordability for their kids. That's what I hear.
Thank you. And finally, oh no, I'm sorry, David Farley next, District 3.
Right. So for me, I think the number one priority for people in District 3 is public safety. As I've said, we're pretty safe right now, but there is a crime wave going on in the East County, and we are not immune to it. I was a little surprised, even yesterday I knocked on a door, and I asked the guy, what is your top concern? And he said that. He said public safety. And I said, hey, we're not as bad as, some other parts of the East Bay. And he said, oh, no, you're wrong. He says, I just had my trailer stolen 2 weekends ago. Been here 50 years, never happened before. He said, even my neighbor a couple blocks away had their house broken into. Never happened before. So it's on their minds. I think public safety is number one. I think if you don't feel safe in your neighborhood, it takes priority over other things. If we have time, I'd love to talk more about housing, and I have some ideas about tackling the housing problem, but that would take more than 2 minutes. But I want to talk about this, climate and water. Do we remember there was a pretty big drought just a few years ago? We were turning off our water to our lawns and so on. What happens if we have a 5-year drought, which is not impossible? I've been doing this for decades. Climate, energy technologies, battery technologies, water, all of it. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? All right? I've been doing it for a long time. For example, did you know that Dublin just last week passed an ordinance, all new buildings have to be built with carbon captured concrete. Did you know that? I wrote proposals on how to do that. All right, should we do that? We're the policymakers. Should we enforce that all new buildings must use carbon captured concrete, for example? Right? There's some questions about that. Is it as strong as regular concrete? Will it last 50 years? Do we really want to do what Dublin's doing? Water. I come from San Diego. Does everybody know what the Carlsbad desalination plant? It's a gigantic water desalination plant on the coast in Carlsbad. It's the only one in California like that. Oops.
Sorry.
A gas plant powers that.
You might get your wish, though.
All right.
Finally, Jeff Kaskey, District 3.
Thank you. So yes, as I go around knocking doors, I've been everywhere from Leahy Square to the fancy apartment, fancy homes, where you have to take a half-mile stroll down the driveway, maybe not quite a half mile. And the answer is actually the same from each person. I asked them, what are your concerns? What would you like council to hear? And their first statement is, Livermore is a pretty nice place. And I get that all across the district. But they do have the concerns. Some of the stuff that you've heard already. Safety is generally brought up. We talk about the fact that they have a concern for safety in general, not that they are really worried that their house is in particular danger. But what many people are concerned about are the things right out in front of them. I get a lot of questions about traffic. What can we do about the traffic, especially when you're talking to the people along East Avenue, along College, along Charlotte, along those places. And there's one line on my flyer that I put on people's door that has gotten more response than all the other things combined, and that is Nob Hill. And when I talk about revitalizing Nob Hill, people are interested because not just for Nob Hill, but they're interested in the concept of here we've had a plan for low-income housing. Why are we not building it? Why do we have a shopping center where nothing has happened for the last almost 30 years? And so that's been an issue that people would like to see, because they like the character of their community. They want to see these areas that they consider somewhat blighted taken care of. So character is important, safety is important. I think people really enjoy the city that they're in. They do feel safe, they do read the news, and they know that there is crime around them. But I think that they recognize that Livermore is a safe place. I will tell you that as a member of Livermore Heritage Guild, I get to meet an awful lot of people who come to our historic sites and our historic events. So I do know a lot of the people whose doors I end up knocking on. And I've been delighted to hear that their concerns are really about Livermore keeping its Livermore character.
Thank you. The next question will go to Kristie Wang, District 4. We've touched on housing here and there tonight, but let's get more specific with our final question. What will you do on the City Council to ensure Livermore achieves its goals for housing in the community across the socioeconomic spectrum, but particularly low-income folks, seniors, and people with disabilities? Oh, and what will you do when your vision for housing conflicts with local interest groups, your peers on the council, and/or mandates from Sacramento or the courts?
Wow, that is the question, isn't it? I will say I'm currently an elected official. I go to a lot of meetings and conferences with other elected officials from all over the Bay Area and across the state. And I often ask council members and mayors from other cities, what's your number one challenge? I've only ever gotten one answer: housing. That is the same. Every single person has said that is their number one challenge. I've never heard a second answer to that. So yes, it's a big challenge. And the state mandates cities to build a certain number of units every 8 years. We're currently a year into a new cycle. We have to build 4,570 units by 2031. And we, as a city, we don't actually build housing, but we zone it. We figure out where we're going to put those units throughout the city, all in one place. Where are you going to put it? You zone it, and then developers can bid to. We don't own that land, but whoever owns it, developers make a bid to build on it, and it has to fulfill there are certain numbers for the level of housing. It's not just, we just need 4,000 units of housing, but some are low income, some are very low income, and some are market rate. There's a range, and there are categories you have to fulfill. And it's so challenging to have all these pieces come together, the policy, the funding, everything to come together. And then sometimes where it hits the wall is when there's community opposition. And that usually comes for the lower income levels, because that tends to be denser housing. People are concerned about traffic and just more people living where they live. And sometimes there are thoughts about who people are who need affordable housing. And we all know that many of us couldn't afford the homes we live in now if we were to buy them at the market rate. I'll have to
Thank
stop.
you.
Okay.
Thank you. Stephen Dunbar, District 3.
As I've done before, let me start with a personal story. I live in Livermore and recently bought a townhouse, or put a down payment on one. It was about 3 years ago. I worked for 6 years as an engineer with 2 engineering housemates, and no car, and no kids, and no student loan debt, and no vacation and some vacation cash out, and living like a monk, practically, to afford that down payment. And I am privileged to live here, and I can account for that privilege, and I am proud of my accomplishments, but that is an unreasonable standard for people to accomplish. We can't do it alone. And in fact, we aren't doing it alone because of those state laws. As much as we hate them, they also hold San Francisco accountable for their massive jobs housing imbalances. And they're losing control because they can't keep up. And we're doing everything we can to do our part. The policy details that I am well familiar with on the Planning Commission, having reviewed the housing element years ago, are many, and there are many strategies. But to some degree, it comes down to feasibility. Is it feasible to get the housing built? We have to account for the costs of the low, very low, median, moderate, low, and the cost to build and the cost of the impact fees. We have to look at that openly, because if we don't, it won't get built. It's that simple. In terms of how to balance the needs of the community or the concerns of the community as we go, we have to explain that we're bound by the law. We have to explain those limitations that I talked about with the airport, where we have FAA rules. But we're going to aim for the best outcomes that we can within the law by responding to specific questions and avoiding that black box problem. Thank you.
Thank you. David Farley, District 3.
Well, let me just start off by saying this idea of housing affordability is a misnomer. It's just not going to happen, okay? Sandia did a study, because we have an attrition problem. People are leaving the labs because they can't afford to live here, okay? So we did a study, HR did a study. The study was, we have 2 employed people full-time on a lab salary. How long does it take for them to afford a house by saving every month, just like Steve said? The computer simulations all came back, never. Never ever. You can never catch up to housing, okay? Housing affordability is a misnomer. The state is wrong on these RHNA allotments. It will never bring down the price per square foot of house. So all you can do is make them smaller to make them, quote, affordable. But guess what? Study after study has shown a family of 4 doesn't want to live in a 2-bedroom condo, even if it is, quote, affordable at $800,000, right? What people forget is pricing is determined by supply, which we're trying to push on, and demand, which nobody's pushing on. Does anybody remember Intel back in the 90s, in the company Intel, down in Silicon Valley? They moved major operations up to Hillsboro, Oregon on purpose. Why? Well, for one, the state of Oregon is a lot nicer than the state of California, but they also found that housing was quite inexpensive up in Oregon, at least back then. It's not now. You can't get prices down when you have good paying jobs within an hour commute of Livermore and Highway 84. It will never, ever, ever happen. The only way to do it is to promote these companies to start diversifying away from the Bay Area. I know it's a controversial topic, but Google and so on should move operations away. These strong demand signals need to move further away, maybe to the Sierra foothills, I don't know. Finally, did you know that Google and these other high-tech companies are buying houses in Livermore? Did you know that? And they're renting them out to their employees as a benefit. We can't compete with that.
Thank you. Jeff Kaskey, District 3.
Thank you very much. So a couple of directions we can go here. First, we may be getting a little help that we had nothing to do with and is not, we can't claim credit for, but the population both in the state of California and in Livermore has been dropping. So some of that pricing pressure, which is the people pressure, will be dropping. Livermore went from approximately 93,000, we're down, the latest report said about 82,000. So that's actually a huge change. We can't take any credit for that, but let's hope we can get some benefit from that. Within Livermore, however, we do have a number of sites where low-income housing is already approved and slated to be built. So we could be building our low-income housing and our housing, mixed housing. Mixed housing at the Nob Hill Shopping Center, at the Rincon Shopping Center, the senior housing out on Pacific. All of these are places where we could be building housing. We also need to make sure that we continue to insist that we have at least 15%, in some cases 20% low-income housing in any development that goes up, because the best low-income housing is housing that is integrated with the rest of the community. So we happen to, at the moment, meet our RHNA numbers, so we don't have that particular pressure. We're meeting RHNA mostly because of the Isabel development, so we kind of cheated on that one, but we'll take that as a win. And we have the other developments ready to go. And Eden Housing, as I've said before, I believe that can be resolved with, we know we have some budget money, and if we had a council willing to be cooperative with the people, I believe that those issues can be resolved rather quickly. So that still isn't going to solve the problem. My friend here to my right is correct. We are in California. The pricing in California is going to be tough, but we can take some edges off. We can make stuff more affordable. We can house some of our people on the margin, and we should do our best to take care of those margins and hope that the trends that with companies like Tesla moving to Texas and all the rest will help also, and the combined effort will give us benefit.
Thank you. Finally, Tom Souls, District 4.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that David's suggestion, well, we just have too much demand here, and Elon Musk has already picked up on that and moved to Texas. So, but it really is a problem, and to be honest with you, I couldn't possibly afford to live in Livermore if I were coming right now from my job in General Electric. The people, as I walked around with the realtors, the people did have houses, and they were teachers, and they were retired firemen, but they already had a house, okay? They bought that house a long time ago. They were, the inflation was actually helping them. And that's why, did I tell this story already about the policeman? Policeman comes to my meet and greet, and he says, well, we started by buying a house out in the Central Valley near Stockton. Then we bought a house in Brentwood. Then we bought a house in Livermore. He capitalized on the inflation that we all know and we all see. And so that's why I really like Livermore's policy for affordable home ownership. Because, you know, that's what I would tell young people. Of course, I didn't listen to it when I was young. But to tell them that, look, we can't control this. Get in the game. We'll help you with that first down payment or the interest rate. Maybe that will help. Otherwise, I totally agree with you. And to be honest, 130 units in Eden housing isn't even a dent in the problem that exists, even in Livermore.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to closing statements. Each candidate will have up to 3 minutes to provide final comments. Going in reverse alphabetical order by district this time, we will start with Kristie Wang, District 4.
So as I've said, I'm running for city council because this is a time of opportunity and challenge for our city. And a lot of these issues are interconnected. We have to figure out how we're going to meet state mandates for housing to accommodate more homes while maintaining the character and way of life of Livermore that we also value. And the reason why many of us are here. We have to figure out how we're going to maintain our aging infrastructure. We have to, we live in one of the most congested corridors in the Bay Area. 580 cuts through Livermore. And this impacts both our ability to get in and out of Livermore, but also chokes our air. And Valley Link is supposed to break ground next year, and according to their website, will be completed by 2028, which seems pretty ambitious to me, but we have to make sure to keep the pressure on these projects that will improve how we travel. And our climate is getting hotter and drier, and we need to figure out how to improve our community's climate resilience, especially for our most vulnerable populations. We need leadership with knowledge, with experience, relationships, and a collaborative style. We can't have entrenched positions. We're a diverse community. People have different needs and opinions of how they want these problems to be solved, and we have to be collaborative and work together. I helped lead the school district out of very challenging times coming out of the pandemic. And as someone who currently serves in the elected office, voters have the benefit of knowing the kind of elected official I am. I work very hard. I attend every meeting. I do all my homework. I attend additional meetings. I attend so many meetings on Zoom where no one knows I'm there, but that's how I learn. I deeply study issues. I'm engaged in the community. I'm out and about all the time. I'm at our schools a lot. And I really want to understand people's experience and what they need. So, because to me, this is a problem-solving job, and I'm here to solve problems. And I am especially concerned about the people who are unseen and left out of these conversations. I am a proven leader and a bridge builder. I will look at an issue objectively and listen to different points of view and seek ways to move forward. It's been a real privilege to serve on Livermore School Board. This was a very hard decision for me to make, but you know the kind of public servant I am, and I hope to earn your vote for City Council.
Thank you. Tom Souls, District 4.
I'm sorry, I kind of...
Yeah, we're going in reverse alphabetical order.
Statement.
Oh, it's a closeout statement. Oh. Well, I had more or less given it. I think that Livermore, if Livermore has enough problems of its own, it doesn't need to worry about Dublin. But I do think it is a good, livable place. It is a place we want to keep we want to keep the character of it. We can keep the character of it. People who are concerned, they are concerned about the future. They are concerned about losing the character of the city. They are concerned about safety, and they should be. We don't want to become, but like many of our neighbors, and I will do the best I can to help keep that. I will vote for better, more beautiful downtown. I will vote for the things that I think people have told me they want as I walk around. As I said, I'm not a politician. I am more a scientist engineer like David or Jeff. But therefore I can add and I can subtract. And sometimes I'm not sure that people can do that. They think that these things can come, you can call it affordable living and therefore it's affordable living. No, somebody has to pay for it. And I would like to see the city be as transparent as possible. Clearly tell people what they are about, clearly be honest, and, don't do anything behind the scenes. And that I will push and I will make sure happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Kaskey, District 3.
Thank you very much. First, I want to thank everybody who showed up here and who's watching. I'm delighted to have people interested in local politics. I realize that this is a year where there may be some other politics going on that might have caught some public attention, so I appreciate your interest here. One of the things that was ever so slightly mentioned that we really didn't get into, and I think it is a concern for our council, are the topics of climate and water. They are things that we don't hear very much when we go door to door. And what does that mean? It means it's an education problem for us. So we need to make sure that we are reaching out to our community and letting them know that there are things that we need to be doing to handle our water issues. We have PFAS issues. We have climate issues. We have a climate action plan. But if our community doesn't know about the climate action plan, doesn't know about our goals, the plan is not terribly useful to us. The city does many things well. It's loved by its residents. Public safety is among the best, and the quality of our community is excellent. Our city services are delivered by an excellent staff. Our downtown is already improved to be the envy of neighboring communities, and our rural surroundings are a part of the town character that we all enjoy. This quality of life is because the residents support their local government when it does well, and they speak up to resist when they believe things are headed in the wrong direction. Whether it is attacks on the urban growth boundary or development they don't approve of, the residents are engaged and they know how to speak up. It is the responsibility of City Council to listen respectfully and not dismissively, not to tell people that they are spreading hate, but rather to listen to the concerns of the community. It's important that City Council respects and implements the vision that Livermore residents have for their community. Of course, residents are not a single voice. Rather, they're something between a chorus and a cacophony of voices. So it's City Council's role to listen to each, to find common ground, and to collaborate to achieve outcomes that continue the cool Livermore that we have. I commit to taking on that role enthusiastically. I have 4 decades in Livermore. I know the residents. I've been working with nonprofits, making successful change, making successful things happen for Livermore, and I'm excited to be able to do that on City Council. I'm looking to listen for common ground and accommodate diversity. I look forward to serving you on City Council.
Thank you. David Farley, District 3.
After 9/11, I was living in Japan, working for an American energy research company. And if you might remember, the U.S. was pumping billions into Pakistan. So I went to Pakistan to see if I could help. Flew into Islamabad. I was escorted by Army soldiers carrying AK-47s. One of my first meetings was with a Pakistani Army general who was in charge of their energy development. And he sits me down and he says, "Dr. Farley, I don't need your money." And I said, "Well, that's good because I didn't bring any money." He says, "But Dave, here's what I do need. We've got plenty of money for these projects. We've got wind resources in Baluchistan. We've got plenty of land for solar panels. What we need from you, Dave, is your deep technical expertise. What I need from you, Dave, is your deep demonstrated project management. That's what we need." That's exactly what I did. I flew into Pakistan multiple times under wartime conditions. Similarly, I went to Kazakhstan, worked with the head of Kazatomprom for their uranium reserves. I was boots on the ground in Indonesia, Lebanon, Tunisia, Slovenia, India, China, The list goes on and on and on. I bring all of this expertise, all of this experience, all of this leadership to the table for the benefit of Livermore. So if you want to talk about energy projects, I'm your guy. If you want to talk about national labs, the largest employer in the city, I'm your guy. If you want to talk about nuclear nonproliferation, I'm your guy. If you want to talk about quantum computing, I'm your guy. If you want to talk about machine learning, I program it myself. If you want to talk about smart housing, I'm your guy. If you want to talk about military service, I'm your guy. If you want to talk about the airport, where I'm a commissioner, or you want to just talk about doing barrel rolls in a military aircraft, I'm your guy. I bring all of this to the table for the city of Livermore. Let's talk about small business. I do have a small business. It's a high-tech business. We have a contract with Morgan State University. I'm working directly with African-American students on quantum entanglement, quantum encryption. These students will be fully prepared for a quantum workforce when I'm done. Let's talk about lacrosse. I'm a coach for girls lacrosse at Granada High School. And what happens is I get these young freshman girls, very shy, very unsure of themselves, never seen a stick before in their lives. And I show them a stick, I show them how to move it, I show them how to throw the ball, how to catch the ball. Then I say to them, do you see that goal over there? And they say, yeah, coach, I see that goal. And I say, do you see that defender standing in front of that goal? Yes, coach, I see that defender in front of the goal. I want you to go over there, try to score a goal, and shove her out of the way. She says, oh, I can't do that. I said, sure you can. You're not going to hurt her. Go ahead. And they go do it. They go do it. My point is, I'm not just, oh, man. Vote for me for council. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Lastly, Stephen Dunbar, District 3.
Thank you for all of your time tonight. Thanks again to the hosts for being here, for hosting us, because it's been a wonderful conversation, as I think you've heard. It's been respectful, and we've highlighted some differences. I do love Livermore very much. I love its downtown, its community, and its opportunities, and I'm looking to serve it for the next few years. It is a baton pass because leadership must continue into the future. Thank you for your service, Mr. Farley, and I will take you up on talking about climate and UGB in another setting here, because it matters to me too, and it matters because it is what I've dealt with growing up. I talked about my mom earlier, and a lot of what I do is because she stood up for me at a city council meeting for that crosswalk to get to middle school, and that one little thing changed my life and mattered for me because it meant I could get there. Those little things that we've been talking about today, housing affordability, I've lived it, and I am personally motivated to find the best solutions for this community because I love this community. We've talked about my platform. I think in particular here, my advantage is in the experience on the Planning Commission and the Asset Management Committee. Those show the little details that really matter to get to the good net positive decisions that we have to make. They are our trade-offs. We will talk about them openly. I have the record of talking about them openly because they matter, because we can only involve the entire community if they understand the entirety of the decision being made. And there are ways to better our communication and make it more concise so that everyone can engage in their own way. I do have lots of endorsements, and I won't list them all here, but I wanted to highlight one in particular from Rebecca Bauer-Calhoun, because I didn't get her endorsement because I agree with everything she says. But some years ago, I went to one of her hikes, and she said, Stephen Dunbar, you're the nicest disagreement commenter I've ever met from Facebook. And I wear that as a badge of honor. And that's my approach to city council in Livermore. I know that there are a lot of contentious issues in Livermore. I hope to meet every single one in district and outside of the district. In my term on city council, I ask very humbly for your support. Thank you.
On behalf of Livermore Vine, I would like to thank all of the candidates for participating, and the Livermore Valley Chamber of Commerce and Amos Productions for their help tonight. A recording of the forum will be available soon through livermorevine.com and Livermore Vine's YouTube channel. You can also watch the video online of our Livermore School Board Forum from September 13th. I'm also going to ask the candidates to stick around for a minute afterward for some posed photos with Chuck. To learn more about supporting our Embarcadero Media Foundation, which is now an independent journalism nonprofit, go to embarcaderomedia.org or speak with Gina or I afterward. And be sure to grab a Livermore Vine mug off the back table on your way out the door. We are so grateful for everybody's support here, and Gina and I look forward to our last 2 Tri-Valley candidate forums of the season in the coming days. Next is San Ramon Mayor and City Council on Wednesday, October 2nd. How is it October already? We'll be in the Roundhouse at Bishop Ranch that evening. Thank you, and have a good night.